back to another video. Wings of Fire as we know it kickstarted with the War of Salmon Succession. 3 sisters of a desert tribe fought for the throne when the queen died to claws that were none of their own. It avalanched into a nearly 2 decades-long feud that killed countless dragons across the continent, even spurring some to leave it altogether. With the release of the official guidebook a few years back, and an update to this story shared in Book 16, we found out a shocking fact. The MudWings nearly had their own War of Succession. What happened here, especially with the tribe so peaceful among princesses? I'm going to be breaking all of this down and more, as well as sharing how it ties into the legendary 𝙈𝙊𝙍𝙁. But before we begin, a huge shout out to my patrons. Note 95, Thistle, Noob, Toe, Pyre, Nuke, Avril, Pancake, 𝙈𝙤𝙁𝙁, Adequate, Enscleaver, Moonclaw, Isaac, Micros 9, Pantala Resident, Shreds the furwing, Crystal, Phantom the Dragon, �rsTurtleTheSeawing, Wolfyez, and Mistyy. Thank you all so much for supporting me. Links to their social medias are in the description down below. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. MudWing succession occurs differently than in most tribes. A royal family is raised in the Marsh Palace, hatched as a clutch with the big wings just like all MudWings do. The current queen let her children mostly raise themselves and learn from the best caretakers in the kingdom. As is typical in their society, and this didn't change just because the dragonets were royalty, the MudWing ruler spent little time or affection on the eggs once they hatched. Officials in the palace treated these dragonets as the royalty they were though, commissioning portraits of them to keep as history records, and ensuring they were well cared for. The young princes and princesses had the typical MudWing bond, one so strong it lasted a whole lifetime. Sibs never really left each other's sides. With such a smooth cycle of a system, how did this tribe nearly lose control over this line of rulers? Like I teased, it begins with a death. Multiple, in fact. Queen 𝙈𝙤𝙤𝙁 of the MudWings was a level-headed dragon who worked hard to maintain the order of her land. However, she was born in a clutch of only 3, 2 of which were her brothers. This gave 𝙈𝙤𝙁 the immediate right to heir once the time came. However, both of her siblings died in small fights with the Skywings before they could ever have eggs of their own. 𝙈𝙤𝙁's own children with an unknown father were 𝙈𝙤𝙁, 𝙈𝙊𝙍𝙁, Copperhead, Possum, and Sawgrass. 𝙈𝙤𝙁 was the big wings of the group, being one of 2 daughters. Despite being described as wise and thoughtful in her earlier years, 𝙈𝙤𝙁 soon grew careless and cold as time went on. She would ultimately become the next queen of the MudWings. Copperhead was fairly witty and quite clever, and firmly said from the beginning that he wanted no eggs of his own. 𝙈𝙊𝙍 was deeply anxious from her hatching, and feared any possible position of leadership. Sawgrass was an awkward dragon who avoided being around others, and constantly worried about everything. And then there was Possum, hardly brave and usually silent. He was typically in a state of depression, unfortunately. So yeah, not a very strong group to be royalty, but 𝙈𝙁𝙁 was definitely the toughest of the bunch, with a real desire to lead. In the end, once the Sibs' mother reached the last stage of her life, elderly and weak, 𝙈𝙁𝙁 challenged and then killed her to take over. At first, things seemed like smooth enough sailing. The MudWings had a dragon on the throne. 𝙈𝙁𝙁 or 𝙈𝙊𝙁 could have their own eggs to keep that direct line of royalty. But things eventually went catastrophically wrong. Remember how these dragons have a strong, lifelong bond with their Sibs? Well, one of the characters in this clutch did something that would change the trajectory of the world forever. He fell in love. But not with a MudWing like everyone always had, and what was expected to spawn new heirs. He met and fell in love with a rainwing. This dragon was Copperhead, the same who never wanted kids in the first place, despite 𝙈𝙁𝙁 always trying to convince him to have eggs. We don't know much about his relationship with this rainwing or how they met, though I need this as a winglet, Tui. But Copperhead ended up leaving the Mud Kingdom. That's right, he disappeared. The prince ran away with his lover, and it was seen as an act of betrayal. MudWing Sibs never left each other, not for anything. The rest of the group was shocked. How could their brother choose a rainwing over them, over his importance to the kingdom and their family? We never learned what happened to Copperhead after, but he didn't come back. This completely put Queen 𝙈𝙁𝙁 over the edge. After having already been stressed and harsh enough with age and the weight of the crown, she snapped. She felt like a failed bigwings for not keeping her siblings together, like it happened with every other generation before. Paranoia swept over the queen, and she had to maintain the control she never truly had in the first place. Ygritte would tell the other dragons terrible stories of what she thought happened to Copperhead in an attempt to make them fear a similar fate and never consider leaving her behind. Ygritte believed her sibs would lose their loyalty to her and vanish off otherwise. This strange and anxiety-induced recklessness resulted in the queen's untimely death. So, as much as she criticized Copperhead for leaving to pursue the life he wanted, Ygritte abandoned her sibs too by ending up dead as a result of this anger. By this point, only 3 royal members remained in the kingdom: 𝙈𝙤𝙍𝙬𝙁, Sawgrass, and Possum. Only 1 woman, meaning 𝙈𝙤 had to step in as queen. But if you recall, this princess hated the very idea of being a leader. She was too scared of the responsibility and felt it unfit for her. She wasn't even the bigwigs. So, despite the crown being placed in her claws now, 𝙈𝙤 couldn't even glance at it. She sobbed for days on end over everything, not eating, for what happened to her family torn apart, and how she'd be in charge of so many dragons, living the life she never wanted at all. The pressure got to her, and it was too much. Just like Copperhead, 𝙈𝙤 left. Gone. Fled the kingdom without a trace. But as Pyrrhian precedent goes, no male may take the throne. So now, the MudWings had no one to lead them. Their original 2 queens dead, a prince in hiding with his reigning love, and 2 scared royals left unable to pick up any pieces. As we find out in The Hybrid Prince, 𝙈𝙤 didn't just disappear off to another kingdom. Rather, she found herself at the end of her flying in the Dungeon Isles 2 or 3 generations ago. Getting an answer to this was so awesome. But how did it tie into things now, and how does this whole mess get fixed anyways? Well, we don't know exactly what fate awaited 𝙈𝙤 on the Forgotten Isle, but she was seemingly accepted into the Wildwing Society like every other lost dragon. She met someone and fell in love, having dragonettes of her own, away from home, not knowing what ever happened or who took her place, because she couldn't leave. It's crazy to think about how 𝙈𝙤 must have been feeling at first. I mean, I understand the fear getting to her head. The March of the Mud Dragons were in disarray and disaster for an entire month. There was no order and nothing to come from the chaos. Sawgrass and Possum tried as much as they could to figure out a next step, but no ideas came. Seemingly, MudWings grew rowdier and desperate for leadership. They were so close to their own war of seeming secession, with no set dragon there to hold the crown. Other Sib troops could have tried fighting for it, or the tribe may have dissolved its main society away without anyone there to make all the choices. Thankfully, however, they were saved by one incredibly kind and hardworking dragon, Olive. Though not of royal blood herself, Olive was a bigwings of her construction worker Sib group. She spent most of her time working in the palace and was aware firsthand of what was going on. Being a calm, guiding figure, Olive gave a saving proposition to Prince Sawgrass. She would ready her own unhatched eggs to become the new royal clutch, while temporarily taking over as queen until they were all of age. This would restore the peace of the MudWings, giving them someone to turn to, and a future to watch grow before their very eyes. Sure, Olive and her dragonettes weren't from the original MudWing line that had governed the land for all its recorded history, but it was a solution to something that could have turned out even worse. Sawgrass agreed, and even fell in love with the new queen. Breaking tradition furthermore, Sawgrass lived with her and helped raise the next generation of dragonettes together. Out of several of these eggs came 𝙗, who would become the ruler when she was ready, after her mother died peacefully, after having reached the end of a long lifespan. Though not biologically related to 𝙗, Sawgrass adored her as a daughter and respected her as the eventual queen. There was no one more perfect for the job, he thought. And so, Olive, 𝙗, Sawgrass, and presumably Possum found peace. I'd like to hope Copperhead and 𝙈𝙤 did out there too. And that's how he came close to a war between the MudWings. With a split family came a whole new line of heroes, giving us the dragons we know today, such as Moorhen. Dugong was a descendant of ex-Queen 𝙈𝙤, and despite being a hybrid, he's really the only living dragon connected to that past bloodline. That is crazy to think about. Thank goodness this tribe avoided war. Imagine a seeming succession battle before ours even began. What are your thoughts on all this? Who do you sympathize with most? And what would you have done in Oliver the Prince's situations? Let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.